My son laughed when the bank's attorney said I could no longer be trusted with my own company. It was a small laugh, almost polite, the kind a man gives when he believes the difficult part is already over. I was sitting 10 feet away from him at a long oak table in a federal hearing room in Baltimore, wearing the same brown suit I'd worn to my wife's funeral 3 years earlier. My hands were folded in front of me. My hearing aids were visible. My hair had gone almost completely white. To anyone who didn't know me, I probably looked exactly the way my son wanted me to look. Old, tired, outmatched. Then the investigator at the far end of the table opened the engineering report my son's attorney had just submitted. He looked at the signature on the last page. Then he looked at me. The color drained from his face. He slowly removed his glasses. "My God," he said. My son stopped smiling. The investigator stood. "Mr. Mercer," he said quietly, "did you write the Harbor Standard?" That was when my daughter-in-law grabbed my son's wrist under the table. And that was when I knew they finally understood the mistake they'd made. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 years before that morning, I buried my wife, Eleanor, on a cold Tuesday in November. We had been married 42 years. For most of those years, she was the person who reminded me that buildings weren't the most important things a man could leave standing. I was a structural engineer by trade. I spent my life studying what failed under pressure. Bridges, parking garages, concrete columns, steel beams, foundations built on bad soil. I could walk through a cracked building and tell you whether the crack meant inconvenience, expensive repair, or death. But when Eleanor got sick, I learned there are failures no calculation can prevent. Cancer took her in 11 months. After the funeral, my house became too quiet. Our coffee maker still sat on the counter. Her gardening gloves were still hanging from a hook beside the back door. For weeks, I kept expecting to hear her call my name from upstairs. That was when my son, Michael, started visiting more often. Michael was 41 then. He was my only child. I loved him the way fathers often love their sons, with pride mixed with worry, and with more forgiveness than we admit. He had joined Mercer Structural Group after college. The company had started with me and 2 rented rooms above a plumbing supply store in Annapolis. By the time I turned 65, we employed 83 people and had offices in 3 states. We inspected hospitals, schools, warehouses, high-rise foundations, ports, and municipal buildings. I never became a wealthy man by Wall Street standards, but I did well enough. The company was worth something. The land it sat on was worth something. And after Eleanor died, Michael began talking more and more about simplifying things. At first, I didn't question it. He would sit across from me at the kitchen table and say, "Dad, you don't need to worry about payroll anymore." Or, "Dad, let me handle the insurance renewals." Or, "Dad, you've done enough. You should enjoy retirement." It sounded loving. Maybe it was loving in the beginning. That's the part people don't understand when they hear stories like mine. Betrayal rarely arrives wearing a black coat and carrying a knife. Sometimes it brings soup. Sometimes it asks whether you've taken your vitamins. Sometimes it says, "I just want to make things easier for you." I had officially stepped back from daily operations 2 years before Eleanor died, but I still owned 62% of the company. Michael owned 20%. A small employee trust owned the rest. My plan had always been simple. If Michael proved he could lead, I would eventually transfer more ownership to him. But I wanted the company protected. Not because I didn't trust my son. Because I trusted math. And math says people change when debt enters the room. The first thing that felt wrong was a letter. It came from a regional bank in Philadelphia. The envelope was addressed to me personally. Inside was a notice thanking me for guaranteeing a commercial loan. The loan was for $4.8 million. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Michael. He answered on the 4th ring. "Dad, everything okay?" "What loan?" There was a pause. Not a long one. Just long enough for me to notice. "What loan?" $4.8 million. Another pause. Then he laughed softly. "Oh, that." I said nothing. SU continued. "It's just a restructuring package. We moved some debt around to support the Richmond expansion." "I didn't approve a Richmond expansion." "You did, Dad." "No. You signed the preliminary authorization in March. I was in Arizona in March. You signed electronically. I don't sign corporate guarantees electronically." That was another rule I'd kept for 30 years. Michael knew it. His voice changed. Not much. But I heard it. "Dad, You've had a rough couple of years. I stared out the kitchen window at Eleanor's empty garden. What does that mean? It means maybe you forgot. I felt something cold move through me. Not fear. Not yet. Something closer to insult. I didn't forget signing a guarantee for nearly $5 million. Okay, he said quickly. I'll come by tonight. We'll go through it together. He arrived with his wife, Claire. Claire had always been charming. She remembered birthdays, sent handwritten thank you cards, brought Eleanor flowers when she was sick. That night, she brought chicken soup. While Michael opened his laptop, Claire put the soup in my refrigerator and said, "You need to take better care of yourself." I almost smiled. Then Michael showed me a PDF. At the bottom was my signature. It looked real, very real, but it wasn't mine. I know that sounds strange. How can a signature look like yours and still not be yours? Because a signature is more than shape. It's movement. Mine had changed after I broke my right wrist at 58. The capital D in Daniel tilted differently after that. Whoever copied my signature had used an older version. I didn't tell them. Instead, I asked, "Where did this come from?" "The company archive," Michael said. Claire touched my shoulder. "You really don't remember?" I looked at her hand, then at my son. "I remember plenty." Michael sighed. "Dad, nobody's accusing you of anything." Interesting choice of words. I hadn't said they were. That night, after they left, I took the document upstairs. I opened the fireproof cabinet in my office. Inside were 20 years of original contracts, corporate resolutions, inspection reports, and handwritten notebooks. Eleanor used to tease me about keeping paper. "You're the only man in America preparing for the return of the fax machine," she'd say. I spent 3 hours comparing signatures. The guarantee was forged. But that wasn't what frightened me most. The document also referenced a project code, R4417. That code bothered me. Our company used a project numbering system I designed in 1998. Every digit meant something. The first letter identified office location. The first number identified project category. The next digits identified year and sequence. R4417 could not have existed when the document claimed it was signed. The numbering system for Richmond had changed 18 months later. To most people, it was meaningless. To me, it was like seeing a driver's license dated 1985 with an email address printed on it. I sat back in my chair. Someone had forged my signature. But whoever did it had made a technical mistake. I could have confronted Michael the next morning. I didn't. This is the part I'm proud of, because I wanted to. I wanted to drive to the office, walk into my son's conference room, throw the document on the table, and demand the truth. But Eleanor used to say anger is expensive because it makes you pay before you know the price. So I waited. I called the bank. I asked for copies of every document bearing my name. They told me I would need to speak with the account manager. The account manager told me Michael was the authorized company contact. I reminded him that I was the majority owner. He became nervous. That told me something. Then he said something that told me more. "Mr. Mercer, your son informed us that you are transitioning away from financial responsibilities." "Did he?" "He said there had been some concerns." "What concerns?" Silence. "I can't really discuss." "Concerns about my mental capacity?" A longer silence. That night, I slept badly. The next morning, Claire called. She asked whether I'd eaten breakfast. Then she asked if I had remembered to lock the back door. Then she asked whether I'd paid the electric bill. Each question sounded harmless. Together, they formed a pattern. Over the next 6 weeks, the pattern grew. My son began copying himself on my personal bills. Claire offered to organize my medical paperwork. Michael suggested I stop driving at night. Then during Thanksgiving dinner, in front of my granddaughter, he said, "Dad, you already told me that story." I hadn't. A week later, Claire said I'd left the stove on. I knew I hadn't. 2 days after that, Michael told one of our senior engineers that I had become confused about some old projects. That engineer called me privately. "Dan," he said, "are you okay?" "Why?" There was a pause. "Michael said you've been struggling." I thanked him. Then I hung up. That was the moment I understood. They weren't just trying to convince me I was losing control. They were building witnesses. I drove to a law office in Washington and met a woman named Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca was 62 and had spent most of her career handling financial exploitation cases involving older business owners. I had never met her before. That was important. No family connection, no company relationship, no one Michael could accuse of being biased. I put the forged guarantee on her desk. She studied it. Then she studied me. "What do you want to do? Find out how much trouble I'm in." She nodded. "That's not what I asked." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I asked what you want to do." I thought about Michael as a little boy, sitting on my shoulders at an Orioles game. I thought about teaching him to ride a bicycle. I thought about the first time he walked into our office wearing a tie, 22 years old, and terrified. Then I thought about the word he had used, confused. "I want the truth," I said. Rebecca leaned back. "The truth may cost you your relationship with your son. I think he may have already spent that." We began quietly. First, I changed the access structure for my personal accounts. I created a new trust arrangement that required independent approval for any transfer of my company shares. I removed Michael from 2 personal powers of attorney he didn't realize he still held. Then Rebecca hired a forensic accountant. That's when the story became worse. The Richmond expansion didn't exist. Not really. There was a leased office, 2 employees, a sign on a door. But most of the $4.8 million had been transferred through 3 shell companies. One was controlled by a college friend of Michael's, another belonged to Claire's brother. The third had no obvious owner. We kept digging. The money had gone into a waterfront redevelopment project in Norfolk. Michael and Claire had invested heavily. The project was collapsing. Permits were delayed. Contractors were suing. Interest payments were eating them alive. They had used my company's credit to keep it afloat, and my forged guarantee put my personal property behind the loan, including my house, including the land under our main office, including 12 acres Eleanor and I had bought 30 years earlier. I sat in Rebecca's conference room, staring at the numbers. "How bad?" "If the bank accelerates the loan," she said, "you could lose the office property." "My employees?" "The company could survive. Maybe." "Maybe?" She didn't answer. I closed my eyes. This was the moment I could have destroyed Michael. One phone call to the bank's fraud department. One complaint. One board meeting. But there was something else. My granddaughter, Emily, was 14. She adored her father. Whatever Michael had become, he was still her father. I wanted evidence strong enough that when the truth came out, no one could say I had ruined him out of anger. So I waited. That's when Michael made his next move. He asked me to attend a routine medical evaluation. I laughed when he said it. Not because it was funny, because it was almost too obvious. "Dad, Claire and I are worried." "About what?" "Memory issues." I remember our conversation about the loan. He stared at me, then smiled. "That's exactly the problem. You think you remember things that didn't happen." I felt something inside me settle. Until that moment, a small part of me had still hoped there was an explanation, a desperate business decision, a mistake, a lie that had grown too large. But when my son looked me in the eye and tried to convince me my own memory was broken, hope ended. I went to the evaluation. On my terms. Independent neurologist. Independent physician. Full cognitive testing. I scored in the top range for my age. The neurologist found no evidence of dementia. Rebecca had certified copies made. We didn't tell Michael. Instead, I let him believe I'd gone to the doctor he suggested. A month later, I received a petition. My son was seeking emergency authority to manage certain company and financial matters on the grounds that I was suffering cognitive decline. He attached statements from 3 people. One was Claire, one was the bank account manager, one was a former administrative assistant who had been fired 6 years earlier. The petition described me as forgetful, suspicious, emotionally unstable, and unable to understand complex financial decisions. I read it twice. Then I laughed. A real laugh this time. Rebecca looked at me. "What's funny?" "They overreached." She raised an eyebrow. "They had a good story when I was just an old widower who forgot things." I tapped the petition. "Now they're saying I can't understand engineering contracts. And I've testified before Congress about engineering contracts." Rebecca smiled. "Good. But I wasn't ready. Because the most important evidence arrived 3 days later. Our forensic accountant found an engineering certification attached to the Norfolk redevelopment financing package. It claimed that Mercer's structural group had inspected and approved load modifications for 2 warehouse buildings being converted into luxury apartments. At the bottom was my name, Daniel Mercer, professional engineer, license number, signature. The report was dated 11 months earlier. I had never seen the buildings. I had never approved the report. And the calculations were wrong, dangerously wrong. I spent 2 hours reviewing them. The proposed live load capacity had been overstated by nearly 30%. If construction continued as designed, the upper floors could fail. Suddenly, this wasn't just about money. People could die. I called Rebecca. Stop everything. What happened? We're not dealing with a forged loan anymore, I told her. She was quiet. Then she said, Who regulates this? State Board. Federal investigators if financing fraud crosses state lines. You know anyone? I used to. Used to? I looked at the report in front of me. 32 years earlier, after a parking structure collapse killed 7 people, I had helped lead a national engineering task force. We created a structural reporting protocol for federally financed redevelopment projects. People in my profession called it the Harbor Standard. My name had been on the first edition. I hadn't thought about it in years. Michael knew I'd worked on it, but he was a teenager at the time. To him, it was probably just another old story from his father's career. He didn't understand what it meant. Rebecca did. She stared at me. The report they forged violates the standard I helped write. And they put your signature on it. Yes, she exhaled. Oh, Michael. We contacted the authorities. Quietly. That was important. The investigator assigned to the case was a man named Thomas Avery. I didn't know him. At least I didn't think I did. He requested documents. We provided them. Then he told us not to confront anyone. So I didn't. For the next 2 months I played the role my son had written for me. I moved slowly when he visited. I asked him to repeat things. I let Claire explain documents I understood better than she did. Once, Michael placed a corporate resolution in front of me and said, It's just housekeeping, Dad. I adjusted my glasses. What does it do? Nothing important. I read the first page. It would have given him authority to negotiate the sale of our office property. I looked up. Where do I sign? His shoulders relaxed. Then I put the pen down. I need coffee. I walked into the kitchen. Rebecca had told me not to sign anything. So I returned 10 minutes later and said I'd forgotten what we were doing. Claire glanced at Michael. He almost smiled. They thought they were winning. That was the strangest part. The more foolish they believed I was, the safer they felt. And the safer they felt, the more careless they became. Michael started discussing finances in front of me, as if I weren't there. Claire made calls from my living room. One afternoon, she said, Once the hearing is done, we can move faster. I was sitting 15 feet away. She lowered her voice when she noticed me. I pretended not to hear, but a recorder in my shirt pocket heard everything. By spring, the investigation had enough evidence. Still, the hearing went forward. That was deliberate. Michael believed the hearing concerned whether he should receive temporary authority over certain company assets because of my alleged incapacity. His attorney intended to present the forged engineering report as evidence that I had approved risky projects I could no longer remember. They were going to use their own crime as proof that I was incompetent. Rebecca called it breathtaking. I called it desperate. The morning of the hearing, Michael saw me in the hallway. He wore a navy suit. Claire stood beside him in cream-colored wool. They looked successful, respectable, concerned. The perfect family trying to protect an aging father from himself. Michael walked toward me. Dad, son, you don't have to fight this. I'm not fighting. He smiled. That same small smile. Good. Then he leaned closer. You'll thank us eventually. I looked into his face and saw the boy I had once carried through a thunderstorm because he was afraid of lightning. For 1 second, my anger disappeared. What replaced it was worse. Grief. Maybe, I said. Inside, the hearing room was plain. No dramatic courtroom benches. No jury. Just lawyers, government representatives, financial officers, and a long table. Thomas Avery, the investigator, sat at the far end. I still didn't recognize him. The bank's attorney spoke first, then Michael's attorney. They described me as a once brilliant professional suffering progressive decline. Once brilliant. I almost admired the phrase. It gave them permission to praise me while burying me. Then they introduced the Norfolk report. Michael's attorney held it up. This document bears Mr. Mercer's signature and professional seal, yet he now claims he has no memory of approving the project. He looked toward me. That alone should concern everyone in this room. Michael laughed, quietly, but I heard it. Then the attorney passed the report to Thomas Avery. Avery opened it. He read the first page, then the second. Then he reached the signature page. His expression changed. He looked at the seal, then at me. His face went pale. He stood. My God. The room became silent. Mr. Mercer, he said, did you write the harbor standard? My son's smile vanished. I nodded. I was one of 6 engineers on the original commission. Avery removed his glasses. My father was Raymond Avery. I searched my memory. Then I remembered. Baltimore. A collapsed parking structure. A young site engineer trapped under debris for 6 hours. Raymond Avery. I had testified in the investigation that cleared him of negligence and proved the steel supplier had falsified certifications. Thomas swallowed. My father said you saved his career. No, I said. The evidence did. He looked down at the report, then back at Michael. This document cites Section 8 of the Harbor Standard. I nodded. There was no Section 8 in the version supposedly in effect on that date. Avery stared at me. Correct. Michael's attorney shifted in his chair. Avery continued. And the project code? Impossible. Why? Because Mercer Structural Group didn't begin using that coding system until 17 months after the date on the report. The room changed. You can feel moments like that. Power doesn't always move with noise. Sometimes it moves when people stop breathing. Michael leaned toward his attorney. Claire whispered something. Avery held up the report. Mr. Mercer, did you sign this? No. Did you inspect the Norfolk properties? No. Did you authorize anyone to use your engineering seal? No. Michael's attorney stood. This is beyond the scope. No, Rebecca said. It was the first time she'd spoken. It is exactly within the scope. She placed a folder on the table. Then another. Then another. Independent cognitive evaluation. Forensic signature analysis. Bank transfer records. Audio recordings. Corporate access logs. The original project code manuals. And finally, the laboratory comparison showing that my electronic seal had been copied from an archived document created 7 years earlier. Michael looked at me. Not angry. Not yet. Confused. That hurt more than anger would have. He truly had believed I wouldn't understand. You knew? He whispered. I looked at my son. I suspected. For how long? Long enough. Claire stood abruptly. We were trying to save the company. I turned toward her. By forging my name? You don't understand what happened. I understand exactly what happened. Michael slapped his palm against the table. Dad, the Norfolk project was going to pay everything back. And if those floors failed? He froze. What? The load calculations. His face changed. He didn't know. For the first time that morning, I believed that. He had forged my approval without even understanding the engineering risk attached to it. Claire looked at him. You said the contractor checked that. Michael stared at her. Avery closed the folder. Nobody is leaving. That was when the door opened. 2 federal agents entered. My son looked at me. Dad. Just that. Dad. Not Mr. Mercer. Not a problem to solve. Not an old man to manage. Dad. I wish I could tell you I felt victorious. I didn't. I felt 70 years old. I felt tired. I felt like the distance between the day my son first held my finger with his tiny hand and the day federal agents placed themselves between us had somehow passed in a single breath. Michael was not arrested in that room. Neither was Claire. Real life is usually slower than stories. There were interviews, search warrants, grand jury proceedings, months of legal arguments. The Norfolk development was shut down before anyone moved into the buildings. The bank removed my personal assets from the fraudulent guarantee. The company survived. Barely. Michael eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy, bank fraud, and falsification connected to engineering documents. Claire reached a separate agreement after cooperating with investigators. The financial penalties destroyed nearly everything they had built. Michael served time, not forever, long enough. Some people asked me whether I was satisfied. That's a strange word. Satisfied. There is no satisfaction in watching your child walk into a courtroom because of choices you would have given anything to prevent. There is relief. There is justice. There is safety. But satisfaction? No. My granddaughter came to see me 6 months after sentencing. She was 15. She sat at the same kitchen table where Michael had once shown me the forged guarantee. For 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, "Do you hate my dad?" I looked at her. "No. How can you not? Because loving someone and protecting yourself from them are not opposites." She began to cry. I moved my chair closer. I told her something I wish I'd understood earlier. Love is not a blank check. Being family does not give someone unlimited access to your money, your decisions, your dignity, or your future. And forgiveness does not require pretending nothing happened. I still love my son, but I will never again give him the kind of trust that asks for no proof. Those are different things. Today I am 71. I still go to the office twice a week. Not because the company needs me. Mostly it doesn't. We have a new president now. A woman who started with us 26 years ago as a junior inspector. She is smarter than I was at her age. More patient, too. My granddaughter sometimes visits after school. She says she might become an engineer. I told her she should only do it if she enjoys being blamed for everything that cracks. She laughed. That laugh sounded nothing like her father's in the hearing room. Hers was warm, young, hopeful. I keep the forged Norfolk report in a drawer in my office. People ask why I didn't destroy it. Because it reminds me of two things. First, even intelligent people can be fooled when love is involved. I was not blind because I was old. I was slow to believe the truth because the truth involved my son. There is a difference. Second, age changes many things. Your knees, your hearing, your sleep, the speed at which you stand up from a chair. But age does not automatically take away judgment. It does not erase experience. And it does not make your life available for other people to divide while you're still living it. So to every father, every mother, every grandfather, every grandmother who has ever heard the words, "Let me handle that for you," I would say this. Accept help when you need it, but understand what you are signing. Keep your own records. Ask questions. Use independent doctors, lawyers, accountants, and advisors when important decisions are being made. And never allow anyone, not even someone you raised, to convince you that protecting yourself is an act of betrayal. Sometimes the people we love make terrible choices. Sometimes they come back from them. Sometimes they don't. But your dignity does not depend on their choices. Mine didn't. My son thought that because I had become quieter after losing my wife, I had become weaker. He mistook grief for confusion. He mistook age for helplessness. And worst of all, he mistook a father's love for permission. He was wrong. I did not destroy my son. I simply refused to let him destroy everything my wife and I had spent our lives building. And when the moment finally came for me to choose between protecting his lies and protecting the truth, I chose the one thing I had taught him to respect since he was a boy. A structure can survive tremendous pressure, but only if the foundation is honest. By Vite. Love does not require us to ignore warning signs, and protecting ourselves does not mean we have stopped caring. Daniel's story reminds us to stay kind without surrendering our judgment, to ask questions when something feels wrong, and to value honest relationships over blind trust. Even after betrayal, we can rebuild with wisdom, dignity, and hope, and still leave room in our hearts for healing. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI for entertainment, while also sharing a positive life lesson about trust, resilience, and protecting what truly matters.